Again, when he left the courtroom for the last time, I thanked him. I said, "You've been a real inspiration to me and other people." What I didn't realize until the very last session in court for review was he had found jobs for 4 or 5 other people in First Nations court, and they were successfully employed in the construction industry. I don't always know what goes on in the hallway outside, but it was good stuff. The third person, one of my favorite. I see him more often than some of my own family. He's a man in his early 30s. He has 2 very young children. He has an ex-wife with many issues of her own that she has to deal with. This man has a criminal record. It's a pretty serious one. And he was facing theft and break-and-enter charges. He had been in foster homes, and he didn't want his children to go into foster care as he had. So he wanted, somewhere deep inside of him, he wanted to parent his children. This man was and still is a work in progress, but we're making progress with him. Keeping him out of jail has been a real challenge for me because sometimes he fights me. But he had to develop, like everyone else, his own healing plan. He didn't like it at first, but I said, if you want to be in this court, you've got to do it. It took a while to get one formulated for him. The first was a stable residence because he had been couch surfing. The next, of course, was to get him into parenting courses and make sure that he attended all the access visits with children. We're not finished with him yet. He's still working on his healing plan. But now, after a year, he has a stable residence for the first time in his life. His children are in care, but he has not missed one access visit with his children. And in fact, he has almost unlimited access now with his children, even though they're in foster care. He's dealing with some lingering health problems of his own. He's been for counseling, residential treatment, and more importantly, counseling for trauma, because heaven only knows he's had a lot of that. The next step is he wants to upgrade his education so he can get a job, so he can get his children back. One step at a time. But it's his healing plan, and he's working on it. I may have a carrot some days, I may have a bit of a stick. He's still working on his healing plan. I just won't let go of him. The fourth one. Actually, a member of my own First Nation in Saskatchewan, a little close to home. A young man who was removed from his parents' care very early on and was in and out of foster care for most of his life. And he's 33, I think, now, or 34. He comes from a family of addiction, of violence, and of instability. He has spent a lot of time in jail. In fact, he spent so much time in jail, darned if he isn't a model prisoner. He does so well. They love him. He doesn't apply for early release. He does his full sentence. He gets to do work around the prison. He gets to have special privileges. He's one of the stars. I told him, you've got to stop doing that. But he's a classic example of how so many of our people, young men and young women, have been institutionalized and can't cope on the outside. They've been institutionalized in residential schools. They've been institutionalized through the foster care system. They've been institutionalized in jails and youth correction centers. They don't know how to cope on the outside. They fail, and they end up back in court again. Yesterday morning, I had to send this young man back to jail. And I said to him, we've both failed. Either your healing plan wasn't the right one, or we didn't follow it closely enough. So while you're in jail, and I didn't want to do that, I want you to think about your healing plan and where you and I went wrong with it. And I said, that's one thing you have to do. The second thing you have to do is start planning now for your release. And I want you to plan for a stable residence. If you do nothing else while you're there, plan for a stable residence when you come out. Because if you don't have a stable residence, you don't have a heck of a lot of anything. Third and final last thing is I want you to come back here to First Nations court on, and I gave him a date, and I want you to be out of custody. I don't want you to be in jail. You'll finish the sentence I've given you. Don't get arrested. Don't get into trouble again. I want you to come through that door, not that door with the leg irons. 3 things. That's all I'm asking. We'll see. Healing plans work because they belong to the offender. In the course of my observations, I've learned the following about inclusiveness, and I'm going to ask you to please excuse the cliches. 1 step at a time. 1 person at a time. People fear change, and people fear the unknown. Don't give up. Think outside the box. When you include 1 person, they really bring other people along. People have been done to, done for, and done at. That isn't inclusiveness. Inclusiveness is enabling and empowering, both on an individual level and on a larger level, a full system. An inclusive system doesn't always require new money. In fact, my First Nations court has no new money at all, period. We just need a creative reallocation of existing resources. Then there's my personal mantra. Never say never. Now, enough of the happy stuff. There's a downside to inclusiveness. First, it's what I call the critics. Those are the people who are critical of other people's successes. They're just jealous. But there are a lot of them around. A long time ago on the prairies, used to have these T-shirts, and they said on the front of them, "Uppity Indians Unite." They were one of the fastest-selling T-shirts you could get. And sadly, more than one offender has told me that if they move, if they get an education, if they get a job, or they go off welfare, they'll lose their friends. They'll lose their known support system. Their friends will tell them that he or she thinks they're too good for the old crowd. As a result, people say that they feel ostracized and they have nowhere to go. Then, there are people who fear having new people in their neighborhoods, their workplaces, and their schools. Some people just don't want a level playing field for whatever reasons. This is my personal little gripe. There are people who believe that judges should punish people and not act as social workers. So, 2, go back to the question we started with. What can happen when we change the system to be more inclusive? Well, I hope I've given you some good examples. The system becomes stronger, more responsive, and more effective. People can accomplish things that they only could have dreamt about. Thank you.